So good morning once again, grade 11. This will be our second lesson for the subject Intro to the Philosophy of the Human Person. Allow me to share screen something for a while. I hope everybody can see this. Can everybody see this? Can I get a response if you can see this one? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. I
Yes,
just
sir.
want to make sure because earlier again, the internet problem here in IA has caused so much of our discussion or activity for with my grade 9 students. So our second lesson is in the methods of philosophizing, but this discussion is focused on what is the supposed content by the time we do philosophy. We started with the doing of philosophy for then that's for lesson 1. We tried to understand why philosophy had to be done. We went into the good that comes out when people practice the art of philosophy. We went into the advantages or the benefits that people can get in the practice of philosophy. And now it's, I think, better for us to go into what we can incorporate by the time we philosophize. So we are going to talk about knowledge. Our knowledge is comprised of ideas and beliefs that we know to be true. What makes up the knowledge that we possess are different things, ideas, beliefs that each of us or almost of us deem to be truthful. And of course, we take these ideas and beliefs from the experiences that we have already gotten from the many years of our existence into this world. In terms of truth, though, on how we see truth, a belief is true if it can be justified or proven through the use of one's sense or senses. So that supports it. For one to be considered true, or for a belief to be considered true, it must be experienced. That's how philosophy. That's how philosophy. That's the groundwork of philosophy. That a belief is perceived to be true if it is proven or justified through one's use of his or her senses. There are important terms that we have to also know in this subject, in this discussion. We have facts, defined as those that contain ideas or information that are easily verifiable. Opinions are statements that go beyond providing facts. They provide conclusions or perspectives regarding certain situations. Take note, providing conclusions or perspectives. Tendency is they are based on an individual's perspective. They, pardon the grammatical error, these provide basis for making arguments and convincing people that a certain claim is a fact. A conclusion is a judgment based on certain facts. Beliefs. So earlier it was also described to be truthful if such beliefs have been perceived through the senses. But other than that, we can also define beliefs as statements that express conviction that are not easily and clearly explained by facts. There are also terms such as explanations and arguments. Explanations are statements that assume the claim to be true. They provide reasons why the statement is true, whereas arguments are those that provide reasons to convince the reader or listener that a claim or opinion is truthful. So that sets a distinction, a difference between an explanation and an argument. An explanation is something that provides a reason to explain the truthfulness of an idea. An argument is provided to convince another person who may be a reader or a listener that such an opinion is truthful, that such a claim is truthful. When one provides an explanation, it might not necessarily mean that the other aims to convince, that the speaker aims to convince another person. An explanation is provided simply to say that one is true, simply to prove that one is true, as others might not have seen it to be. Whereas an argument is provided with the main goal of convincing another person of the truthfulness of a claim or opinion. We also try to differentiate truth and knowledge because, as said in the second slide, our knowledge is based. Let's go to that slide. We go to this. Our knowledge is comprised of ideas and beliefs that we know to be true. So I think it's fair enough that we also try to differentiate truth and knowledge. Truth lies at the heart of any inquiry, and it is considered to be a fact that has been verified. The verification of truth is placed on situations. That idea has come to be truthful and is as it is applicable to a particular circumstance or situation. Knowledge, though, is defined as simple data that comes from the outside that passes to our senses. It must be truthful to gain validity and acceptance. You also have propositions. In the process of philosophizing, it is just normal to talk of propositions, especially that there are so many of the philosophers have gone into proposing ideas, principles, claims, and opinions which have stood time and even reached the present. Propositions have been considered as truthful. Philosophers consider truth as a kind of quality or value. Propositions are statements then about the world or reality which may or may not carry some truth in them. That is why some find the time to still continue proving them. Others have already accepted the fact that such a proposition may not be useful or truthful in a particular moment or instance. In debate, the concept of having a proposition is not actually new. In fact, when propositions are placed in a debate round or given in a debate, people then, or the debaters then, have the task of proving the proposition to be truthful or not. Or they have the task of proving whether the proposition comes to be applicable or not. What is truth and why is truth important? Knowledge is seen to be the clear awareness and understanding of something, the product of questions that allow for clear answers provided by facts. What we know is what is observable or evident in the real world. Propositions which are observed to be real or truthful are considered facts. And there are statements, however, that are not evidently or immediately known to be true, and they are called claims. They require further examination to establish whether it is true or false. This is where truth comes in. The truth of the world, the truths in this world, the truths that comprise reality are the ones that we can help, that can actually help us in supporting these claims. The truths that are experienced through our senses are the ones that guide us to form these claims. They are probably not truthful to others, but the claims that we formulate are, by the time we create a claim, we have experiences to support that such a claim is actually truthful. These truths have been registered in what we call as our knowledge, and that set of knowledge, that set of truths gather together to establish the claim that we are proposing. How do we know if something is true? There are conditions for something to be considered truthful. It has already been emphasized Something is true if it can be justified or proven through the use of one's senses. Something is also true if it is based on facts. Something is also true if it is a product of agreement or consensus. And lastly, if it can be applied in real life. This is where the danger of the discussion of truth comes in. If it's a matter of relying on one's senses, if it's a matter on something being factual, a product of agreement or consensus being applicable in real life, this more or less puts so many things around us in question. There are a lot of things in this world that we believe to be truthful, but others would still put at a question on whether they're true or not. For sure, you've encountered a lot of videos, or there's even a movie, I think it was in a movie before, that posed the question on whether God is real. Familiar with this? There's been a movie about this one. It was a movie about a professor who posed in his philosophy class to he posted to his students and asked his students to prove that God is that God is real. Because accordingly, the ground of that teacher is God is not something that is perceived through the senses. So by these criteria alone, it already falls short. The statement that God is real already falls short out of the three. Well, it may be a product of agreement or consensus, but which among our senses have proven that God can really be felt? That was the ground of the professor. If we simply rely on these, then like what I said earlier, so many things around us can be put to a challenge, can be put to a question. But of course, that is not to say that whosoever believes in these four will just have to be strictly in adherence and be limited to these four for one to know something to be true. We continue. In the process of formulating claims, there's also a tendency that we make fallacies. Fallacies are arguments based on faulty reasoning. The problem with fallacies is that sometimes they make our statements sound emphatic, truthful. Take note, sound truthful. I did not say that they already are truthful. Fallacies make our statements sound truthful, appear emphatic, and more convincing. But actually, these are based on faulty reasoning. Some of them are intentional, as the person making the claim is desperate to convince you to accept his or her argument. Before I proceed to the next slide, while some fallacies are intentional, others make fallacies unconsciously, especially if they've already been so used to presenting their ideas in a particular manner to where they have not been aware of a fallacy coming out from what they say or how they've actually said it. To those who have had a chance to be in a debate class in the previous school year, in their previous high school years, fallacies are quite expected to be in the bank of information debaters are supposed to bring with them. Why? When debate is done, it is really expected that the ideas we formulate are not on faulty reasoning, that the ideas we formulate are logical and sensible. If a debater notices from the opposing speaker a fallacy, that can really be charged against the speaker's speech. And that is to prove that the opposing debater has weaker arguments than the other. So fallacies come in several names. The ones I'm showing you right now are just a few of the many fallacies that are available or that are possibly going to be committed by the time we present our ideas or arguments. We have the ad hominem fallacy, a fallacy of attacking the person instead of the argument itself. That instead of focusing on the content, tendency is the the person in terms of who he or she is brought into the argument, which really has nothing to do with the exchange of opinions or ideas.
You can be heard. Yes. Hello, guys.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
How is it? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can,
sir.
sir.
Okay, we continue. Do you already have your modules? Have you received your modules now?
Yes, sir.
I have mine.
Yeah, yes, sir. I have mine.
So you've
Oh.
retrieved your modules already. That's great. I'll just not share any. If it's all right with you, I'll just not share a screen anymore because in the event that this gets cut off again, wait, someone doesn't have a module. Runs. Why runs?
Also me, sir.
Sir, my mother wasn't able to get my module, sir, because the teacher already said that it's complete now, sir. But
Have mine, sir.
when we arrive at the house, sir, it's only my module. It's not been found.
I can't hear you, Runs. Runs? I think it's the internet again. Sure, can you hear me, sure?
Yes, sir.
No, Rans, don't type it. Say it, Rans, so that we'll get used to your audio. Hello, Rans.
A while ago, sir, my mother is getting the module, sir, and then Ma'am LV said that the module is complete na, sir. But when we arrived at the house, sir, my module wasn't found. It's only my brother's module.
For a while. Wait, Rans, so you did not receive your module?
No, I haven't, sir. Only me, sir.
Rans, sorry?
I haven't, sir.
Again, sorry?
I haven't.
But your brother was able to receive this module, right?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, later on, each of you will be able to get a copy now of your modules. I'll just not share a screen at all because at any point in the discussion, the internet will just cut us off. The share screen will be cut off again. So the first fallacy that was mentioned is the ad hominem fallacy, or attacking the person instead of the argument itself. It's simply, in common English, in layman's English, it's a personal attack. And we do not tolerate that by the time we are supposed to follow logical reasoning or unfaulty reasoning when we present our arguments. The second fallacy is the ad baculum fallacy, or an appeal to force. It is the use of threat or force just so someone gets convinced. It is using threat or force in an undesirable event to advance an argument, which might have been to those. I'm not sure if others are familiar with Kadbol. If you've been into a Kadbol experience, it's, though it's not natural, but it's quite expected for students to start appearing in this manner where they present. James Spania, I think in your time last year, James, no one presented this kind of projection. No one did this kind of projection.
Yes, sir. No one.
No one did. It was in the previous years. There were really a lot of forceful, not threatening, forceful presentations and projections of debaters. But of course, yes, James.
The ano sir, the one from Ball High, the team A.
You did not need to mention a school, James. This is recorded, James.
Sorry.
Let's just, I hope that a beep can be made later on to conceal the name of the school. Just because someone uses force or threat doesn't mean that the other should be convinced right away. Like the example given there, that's not a good way to convince other people. Imagine someone saying this. This will be though in a classroom setup. I think this is in a classroom setup. If you do not agree with my political opinions, you will receive flat 70 on your card. So that is not a good way to get others, to make others get your idea, or make others agree with you. Another possible fallacy that people make is ad misericordiam. In debate, they are more completely said with the argumentum word. So in debate, you'll hear them being said as argumentum ad, argumentum ad. So that's how they're rather structured. But it's also fine, uh, it's also fine if you just simply say them as ad misericordia. Ad misericordia is an appeal to mercy, pity, or sympathy. Like the example there, you can't fire me. I have a wife and 12 kids who will go hungry if I lose this job. You can't really expect people to get swayed by your opinions if you are going to simply rely on logical presentation. I mean, sorry, not logical. If you're going to simply rely on an intellectual presentation, intellectual meaning you are going to simply speak using facts. Sometimes there needs to be a touch of sympathy with the way you say things. But sometimes if it's just going to be flooded or overwhelmed with sympathy, that's where the fallacy comes in. That's where the error comes out. If sympathy is one that rules the delivery of the presentation to the point of compromising the content of the argument that's being said. Another fallacy is argumentum ad populum, or an appeal to majority or bandwagon. Just because that's how the majority believe things to be doesn't mean that that's the right argument. Like for instance, every boy your age already has a girlfriend, so you should go find one. Just because the majority sees the community to be at that age for boys to have a girlfriend doesn't mean that that boy at that age, a singled out boy reaching that particular age, should also be committed in a relationship. One does not need to present an argument of bandwagon just so the claim is going to be accepted. Argumentum ad antiquitatem, or an argument in antiquity, an appeal to tradition. Just because an idea has been acceptable for a longer period, or for long periods of time already, or that it has held itself truthful for a long period of time, doesn't mean that it can't change. Several practices might have already been existent for long periods of time, but these practices do not necessarily mean to be absolute. That's what argumentum ad antiquitatem is trying to tell us. For instance, the example here, marriage has traditionally been between a man and a woman. Therefore, a gay marriage should not be allowed. That is not to say, of course, that everybody should really accept, or that we are right away, right there and then accepting it. But we are presenting the possibility that in the practice of other countries today, the concept of marriage has been given a different touch. A practice that has been done for several years may not necessarily prove to be the same the entire time. It can change. That's what the fallacy of antiquitatem is trying to say. The fallacy of ad verecundia, or a misuse of authority. When someone is quoted, when someone is quoted to support one's claim, but that person is not the right authority to speak for that matter. The example here, 4 out of 5 dentists agree that brushing your teeth makes your life meaningful. Yes, dentists are persons in authority, but the question is, are they the right persons to speak of the mean, or to speak of what makes life, what gives life meaning? That's an issue. That's another issue. Like for instance, you want to talk about success in the field of education, or what are the requirements for one to become successful in the field of education. But then you have actually quoted, this is not to offend anybody perhaps, but you have quoted the Secretary of the Department of Health. The Secretary of the Department of Health is a person of authority, but the area of specialization might not actually fall into his line. So we need to look for the right person to speak for the right content on a particular matter to avoid the fallacy of ad verecundia. Another fallacy is the fallacy known as dicto simpliciter, an argument based on an unqualified argument generalization, where the example is exercise is good, therefore everybody should exercise. The qualifications for what makes something good have not been clearly presented. So the claim, the given example, does not stand to be qualified to speak for, to be given out to everybody. You have the fallacy of composition as another fallacy, where it is assuming that what is true of a part is true for the whole. This is in literature, of course, in literature, this is synecdoche. The figure of speech here is synecdoche. A part is made to represent the whole, and vice versa, the whole can be made to represent the part. But in logical reasoning, synecdoche doesn't work. You can't make a part speak for the whole. A sample cannot be made to speak for the entire population if we are to talk about logical reasoning. The fallacy of division. The whole now, this is the opposite of the fallacy of composition. The fallacy of division is telling us that sometimes there are people who assume that what is true for the whole may be true for its parts. For instance, you come from a family of doctors and lawyers, surely you can do better in this course. In the courses of medicine and law, just because all of the members in the family have come from these fields doesn't mean that that individual member, a child perhaps, will have to also take on that same field. That if someone deviates, that's a common tendency, I think, that if you are a family of businessmen or business professionals, and then you've decided to become a teacher, people would meet you with so many questions. You're a teacher? How can that be? Your father owns a business. Your mother is a successful businesswoman. Why are you into the field of teaching? Or You're a child of a teacher. Your father is a teacher. Your mother is a teacher. So you are also expected to be a teacher. That's the fallacy of division. And of course, one should not be defined by the professions of the people that surround him or her. The freedom to choose a profession to be practiced based on this example is to be enjoyed by everybody. Hasty generalization. The generalization is reached too hastily. There are too few instances or evidences to support such a conclusion. We have here an example. You can't speak French. I can't speak French. Carla can't speak French. Therefore, nobody in the school can speak French. Just because three persons have been identified not to be able to speak a particular language in this example doesn't mean that no one in the school could speak the language. Like for instance, your score in the first ST is low. In Philo, your score is low. In Gen Math, your score is low. In Bio, in ST1 for Bio, your score is low. And then the student can then conclude, I think I'll fail this semester. That's too hasty to generalize or to create that. It's too hasty to create such a generalization because the records have just come from the first exam. It's unfair to arrive at such generalization because things can actually change along the way. There are still so many things that can happen. Peticio, the last one. I'd like to request one of you to read this non-English fallacy. Josh, can you please read? Do not read begging the question, Josh. I'd like you to read the non-English term for the fallacy.
Petitio principi.
Again.
Petitio principi.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh. What about Lucia? Can you please read this to us? The next fallacy, but not the English translation. Go.
Petitio principi.
Again.
Petitio principi.
So Lucia got there was one part though of the pronunciation of Lucia that she missed. The word is that term actually is petitio principi. There will have to be a different a separation of the last I found in the last word. Petitio principi. That is assuming that the thing or idea to be proven is true. However, it is yet to be proven true. The example here is God exists because the Bible says so. Why we can trust what the Bible says? Easy, because the Bible is the word of God. Not one in that example, in those sentences, has proven what needs to be proven. Just because it's what the Bible says, of course, this is not the person. I recognize in the existence of God. I recognize the existence of God. This discussion is for academic purposes only. Just because the Bible has presented or has stated that God exists, it must not be used to prove. That statement must not be used to prove the existence of God. Because the existence of God has yet to be proven. Or, how else does petitio principii work? A student is a student is seen to be guilty in the act of cheating. Let's try to consider that. So to prove that the student is to prove that the student was guilty of cheating, what the arguer might say is the student is guilty of cheating because scores of those who cheat tend to be better than those who do not. And since that student's score is in fact way better than our scores, so he must really be guilty of cheating. The student being accused of cheating, or the cheating accused to that student, the act of cheating accused to the other student, is to be proven. That's what needs to be proven. So to logically prove that that the student was really cheating, we go into substantial facts, substantial evidences. Was there a paper that contains any form of cheat that was found? Is there a classmate that could prove that the student was really cheating? Did the student talk to another student while the test was being taken, while taking the test? Was there someone who really saw what the student was doing while the test was going on? So we go into substantial evidences. We don't use assumptions of what performances a student who cheats can do or can show. In the example earlier of the student who was cheating, petitio principii is quite evident because the claim was tried to be proven. However, it went in circular argumentation, and that no proof was substantially made. The post hoc fallacy, a cause-effect fallacy. Actually, in debate, post hoc can come in two types. It could be the non sequitur, a simple cause-effect relationship, or the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, where you cite a particular instance in another country or in another place, and yet you're bringing it to your own. The most famous post hoc fallacy that is used in debates is that of death penalty. Why does death penalty fall on the post hoc fallacy? In other countries, the imposition of death penalty proved to be a deterrent to crime rates. That's in other countries. Death penalty in the Philippines is not actually new. Because the Philippine government before saw it to be a deterrent to crime rates in many Western and European countries, the Philippines tried to impose death penalty here in our country. To their surprise, crime rates in the Philippines did not decrease at all. So that's where the post hoc fallacy goes. That's where the post hoc fallacy comes to be applicable. Just because it's truthful in other places doesn't mean it will also be truthful in ours. Just because it's the cause of other countries and the effects came out, it doesn't mean that the same effects will come out here in our own. In the example, every time this is for the the example that you have here, the simple non sequitur, which is also under post hoc. Every time you wear your red scarf, you cry. Therefore, you should get rid of it. Or a common example in a classroom setup. Who among you here, the teacher might even want to ask, who among you here has good penmanship? And then students start to point at someone or call out someone's name. For example, James ma'am, James sir, James has good handwriting. Oh, okay, since James has good handwriting skills, he will be our class secretary. That actually has nothing to do with this. Penmanship is actually not a requirement for secretarial skills. Especially in the times today, we don't demand that you should have good handwriting skills or good penmanship for you to become a secretary. Or, what's worse, teachers would tend to, I don't know how it went though, but back in elementary, this was a common practice. A teacher would ask, or a teacher would ask another teacher, who is the first honor student in the previous year? Why? Because that student will be our bid for being the class mayor. For public schools, that's how it works. I don't know with how the public school system works now, but before, when I was in elementary, that's how it kind of works. That if you're the known first honor student of a class, you'll be more or less voted as the class mayor. But that has nothing to do. Well, there may be some form of correlation with being a first honor student, being a top performer in class, and being a student leader. That's not an absolute case. It does. Queenie really said, I think Queenie has just agreed with it. Up until now, sir. So see, that is a post hoc fallacy. Just because someone stands out in class as being the top performer doesn't mean that that doesn't follow that that same student exhibits good leadership skills. However, though, for the muses and prince charmings of the class, more or less the requirement would be the physical attributes. But now, other than the physical attributes, we go with what really composes beauty, what makes up beauty, to represent or for students to act as ambassadors of beauty, ambassadors and ambassadresses of beauty in a particular class. Another post hoc fallacy, which has been projected in so many Western movies. What do people say if a girl has a blonde hair? What's the idea behind a woman
Stupid.
with a blonde hair, James?
Stupid.
See, that's a post hoc fallacy. Maybe because that's how it was projected in so many movies, that it's not right. It's unfair for it to be generalized for all other blonde women out there. The word Karen, familiar with that word? The word Karen is a product of a post hoc fallacy. Surprisingly, though, people have really lived up to the reputation of being called a Karen. So these are post hoc fallacies. Another thing in the formulation of truths and knowledge is that possibility by which we insert our personal views in the presentation of these truths. This is where biases come in. Biases are not necessarily errors in reasoning, but they refer to tendencies or influences that affect the views of people. So we have correspondence bias, to judge a person's personality without regard for external factors or situations. Like if someone is a soldier, has fought in war and has killed many, that soldier will right away be labeled as bloodthirsty murderer. It's unfair. Of course, we cannot do this kind of generalization because the situation demands for one to be ready to kill another person as that person is a soldier. Confirmation bias, the tendency to look for and accept information in a way that confirms one's own beliefs and reject ideas that go against it. For instance, how can I accept this view that there is no God when I am a Christian? Another set of 4 biases, the conflict of interest. If something does not go with your interest right away, one would say it's wrong. If it doesn't fall with what interests a person, the one who presents that truth or the one who listens to that truth can right away say it's not right, it's incorrect, because it went against someone's field of interest. Cultural bias, where one's cultural background comes into play, or one's set of traditions, mores, and norms would come into play to affect one's view or perspective towards a particular idea or claim. framing, to focus on a certain aspect of a problem while ignoring other aspects. This is partial thinking without consideration of other aspects that could affect the entire situation. Hindsight, like what you knew all along, what you've known way beforehand. For instance, like what you've known way beforehand, and that you can already think of a possible consequence, of a possible of a possible event that could happen next. For instance, if you look at the example that you have in your notes, to those who already have a copy of the module, you have there an example for hindsight, and that was intentionally left unfinished. For the example of on hindsight, does your copy end with the word "and"? If you look at your copies, it just they just end with the word "and." So the example is when you put a glass on the edge of a table and you start cleaning and bumped the glass and it fell to the ground, and what could have possibly happened next? Alan, what could have possibly happened next there, Alan? Using hindsight, what's the next thing that had happened here? You put a glass on the edge of a table, you start cleaning the table and bumped the glass and it fell to the ground. And what happened next? Alan, how you say something? What's the next thing that happened, Alan? Alan's not saying anything. What about Sher? What's the next thing that happened, Sher?
The glass was broken.
Correct. So see, our hindsight, yeah. Okay, Alan is already typing. His audio is not working well. So our hindsight, use of hindsight would tell us that once the glass has fallen into the ground, it would break or be broken into pieces. So our bias there has told us of what happens next, because that's what we've known of things before. So time check, it's 9:33. On Wednesday, we are going to have some activities, some questions to be answered. So please be ready for that. So for now, that would be all. Goodbye and thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you, sir.